Welcome to the TrustleBridge Capital monthly video series entitled Asking for a Friend. I'm your host, Eric Jefferson, and for this month, we're tackling a fairly controversial question, one that looks at the investment implications for one political party over the other, certainly being in an election year, one that we have received quite a bit. A goal to share some thoughts, some data, more importantly, allow you some talking points as we think about positioning a portfolio around varying political outcomes. Now, before we get started, we have a few quick words from our legal team. With that, we can go ahead and begin. And want to start here by going through, you see on the right-hand side, we've looked at the S&P 500 market return in each of the last 24 presidential elections going back to 1928. Where President Hoover took over. You can go through, we can look at what the market did in a particular year. The key takeaway that I would offer investors focus on for this page, in 20 of the 24 years, that's 83% of the time, the market was positive. That's actually better than the long-term average for the S&P 500. So factoring in those 3 additional years of a presidential term. Also, you can see the 2 scenarios that would apply here with respect to a Democrat in the office, and then what the resulting performance would be based upon who ultimately took over. Now, at the end of the day, who's elected doesn't necessarily matter as much. The key takeaway from this presentation would be this slide right here. When you think about long-term, ultimately, which political party is better for markets? As you can go through and you can look at what those varying annualized returns are under a left or right political regime. When we think about what the congressional mix was in each of those periods, again, under both a Democratic president and a Republican president, the best returning scenarios were where you often had a split Congress. The thought process being markets are less inclined about one party's leadership versus another. More, their focus is on, do we have a mix? The thought process being that in that scenario, less is likely to be done, less in the way of meaningful policy change that could require companies to pivot their strategy and or hold off making any meaningful investments. So the unequivocal, clear answer to this question, do markets favor one political party over the other? The answer is they actually favor 2. It's less about who is in the executive branch, more is that individual in the executive branch look different than who is making up the congressional arms. In that scenario, again, gridlock is actually good. For as frustrating as that can be for a nation with respect to policy change, certainly a topic every politician has talked about for the last 100 elections. That being said, the end of the day, change not necessarily good for markets. So something, depending upon how the congressional alignment will shake out this fall, that likely has a much bigger impact as opposed to who is taking control of the White House. Now, as this pertains to investments, again, certainly politics can be a very polarizing topic. People can have very strong views. At the end of the day, though, markets are up more than they're down. Markets are up during the opposing political party more than they are down. And so if you take a look at this chart, again, going back to 1949, this is really just designed to illustrate the benefits of staying disciplined, staying invested, regardless of the political outcomes. We have the black line there that plots your performance. Had you been invested from day one, 1949, in the blue and the red lines respectively, you can see what that same return would have been had you simply just invested in the years under one political regime's leadership versus another. Again, the goal here, as much as politics can be very polarizing, that's not something that should necessarily factor in to how a portfolio is constructed. So that's all for this month. I thank you for taking the time to join us. And again, please encourage you to submit questions for future videos.